I attended the University of Minnesota on a full athletic scholarship, and so I know the work that is being done in the park board and the work that has helped and benefited a lot of people in the community. However, what the community doesn't know is all of the disparate treatment, the harassment, the retaliation by Superintendent Jane Miller, and the board is very aware of this because it's been brought to the board on numerous occasions. It's been in the Star and Tribune, it's been on NPR, it's been on the Minneapolis Spokesman, it's been everywhere. We've gone to several people, and you guys keep telling us they're independent and that we need to go to them, but we're going to them. And every time we go to them, we get the same response, a pat on the head and say, okay, we'll deal with it. Now we're at a point where you guys can do something about it. I went to my own union, and the union lawyer is Dwayne Johnson, who happens to be your husband. Am I correct? So yes, that's the reason why you're definitely in favor for this. You're pushing this as hard as you can. And I've watched you on many occasions stopping people from talking and giving them an opportunity to speak. You're sitting out there in your nice house, petting your cats and doing everything that's pleasable and plausible to you, while all of this racism is going on right underneath your nose. And the mayor is aware of it. And you know what? If nothing is done, you know what you're doing? What you're saying is you're saying to this board, okay, you're going to treat them just like the Klan. We're supporting what you do, Klan, but we're going to take our hands out of it. How can you give money to the Klan and support them and say, oh, they're a different organization, they're a different independent agency, we have nothing to do with it? Yeah, there's something that you can do, and you do need to do it. Now, let me tell you something. Your question might be, well, why are you still working for the park board? Well, let me tell you something. I love what I do. I'm good at what I do, and she knows that, but that's what she's afraid of. I'm here as a mandated reporter. What I do is if I see something suspicious, if I see something that's wrong, I stand up for it. And because of that, you know what's happened to me? I've been terminated, but I got my job back through civil service. I've been double demoted. The first time ever in the history of the park board, a person has been double demoted. Why? Because of that woman right there. Okay, she bullies. She retaliates, and I'm not the only one saying. The board, her own board,
ma'am, if you could direct your comments
Brad Bourne has indicated, he is a board member, he's indicated that there's bullying going on. So they're aware of this. Yes, we need the money, but are we going to give money to a racist organization and support that? Ms. Johnson, are we going to do that, Barbara?
If you could please direct your comments.
I'm directing it to everybody,
yes,
but she's pushing it.
Okay.
And what I'm telling you today is that there's a lot that the city of Minneapolis doesn't know about the good old park board. And just for the record, we were #1 system before she got here. So it's not like she came and made us a #1 system. We have the front runner people who are out there doing the work. So guess what, ma'am, who had the trophy and the picture of her daughter? I too have children, and I have pictures of them with trophies and awards as well. Yeah, we're doing the work, but we're getting treated like garbage, and you don't see that. In addition to that, it took us 2 years to pass our union to get 2% why the management team gets a raise every year. Now ask me how I know this. I've been a part of the management team for 17 years. So I'm not telling you what somebody told me. I'm telling you what I know because I sat with her on management team. The reason why I got double demoted, you want to know? It's because I'm a mandated reporter. If I stand up and speak up, that's what happens. And they're using me as an example to other employees. If you speak up, this is what will happen to you. Just like they did way back in the lynching days. They lynched black people to show if you act up, if you speak out, this is what you get. And I'm going to tell you something. For all of you people up here of color, you are supposed to be everybody actually up here is supposed to be about change, but especially people of color. You're supposed to be out there speaking for your constituents. You're not supposed to be business as usual, just to have a name or have the appearance. You have an appearance? No. You're supposed to be up here to make change. And I'm going to tell you something. No matter what it takes, if I have to go all the way to the Supreme Court, I will make sure that justice is served for what was done to me by the hands of this board and this superintendent, because it's going to continue. You give this money, what you're doing is you're saying, hey, we're going to close our eyes. You continue to be a racist organization. You continue to treat these people the way you want to, and we're going to close our eyes to it. I say, yes, we need some money, but not at this way. Not at this way. Thank you.
We have two more people who have signed up to speak. One is Adriana Cerrillo. don't know if that, yes, ma'am. If you would come forward, then we have Mark Andrew, and there were a few people that I called, I will call again, who didn't come forward.
Good morning to you all. My name is Adriana Cerrillo. I live in 1367 Willow Street. I do appreciate that. Thank you, City Council Goodman, for all the wonderful work that you're doing in the Loring Park area. So thank you. It's greatly appreciated. I have been living in Minneapolis for the last 3 years, and I do appreciate very much the parks, the beauty of what Minnesota represents. I lived in Florida for 20 years prior to this. However, hearing the concerns and the passion, I think what the request that I do have is that you, as our representatives, do hold accountable the park board individuals. Somebody has to, because passing the ball back and forth is not gonna work anymore. Somebody has to do the job, and that is your job as our representatives. Because I love to hear this equity word over and over and over. However, who was part of the decision making whenever this came up to be? Where was the Latino and the communities of color? They were not present at that table. So I feel like we are being disrespected and patronized in a way by saying, you know, we don't need you. White people can make the decisions for you all. You know, you come later whenever we do the community outreach. That's not gonna work anymore. And you know, the beauty of the city is that we are talking about issues that no other places can handle, like white supremacy. So let's just dismantle the system together, because I don't think that any of you all support racist practices. So thank you for the work that you're doing.
Thank you, ma'am. We have Mark Andrew, and then I had a few people who signed up, and I did not hear from them. They include John Herman, Liz Pitts-Cartwright, and Maria Pittner. Mr. Andrew.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. I will be very brief. I'm Mark Andrew. I am the chair of Save Our Minneapolis Parks, which is a citizens committee with a sole purpose of accomplishing 3 tasks. The first task is to secure enough funding to improve and maintain our neighborhood parks in the city of Minneapolis. The second purpose of our organization is to assure that that money is available for 20 years so that we can complete the fundamental work of making sure that we have completed our task before us. And the third is to encourage a strong commitment to equity programming, and the purpose of equity inside our Minneapolis city parks. I want to speak in support of the Johnson Amendment to the substitute ordinance that is before you, which accomplishes all 3 of these goals. And I want to say to the council members, I have been very moved by the personal involvement of every member of this council to put together a finished product that addresses the concerns that I've just articulated to you. I want to thank you for that. You've spent a lot of time. This is a very, very good amendment, and it will accomplish our goals, and it will make our city better. And for the first time in my long history in public life, this will be a true collaboration between the Minneapolis City Council and the Minneapolis Park Board, which has had a dysfunctional relationship for decades to the detriment of the quality of our city parks. So you're resolving not only an economic problem, you're resolving a structural problem within our city governance structure, and I thank you for that.
Thank you. Were there any speakers that I had called on previously, if you or others who would like to speak? And if you haven't yet signed up, I would ask you to, after you speak, go and sign up. Yes, ma'am?
Hi, my name is Liz Pitts-Cartwright.
Okay.
I apologize, I was just out in the hall and didn't quite get in quick enough.
Yeah.
I am a clinic student at the University of St. Thomas in the Community Justice Project. I testified previously before you guys on April 13th to address some of our concerns in our semester-long investigation into discriminatory practices by the Park Board. I'm going to address the lack of community engagement and transparency by the Park Board. My colleague Maria Pittner will cover the lack of progress in the areas of equity. While the MPRB may suggest that it's made efforts to be transparent, our investigation and interactions with them tell a different story. We reached out to them and met with them on March 25th. And in that meeting, we were met with opposition and hostility and an inability to communicate substantive steps that had been taken to address the concerns raised in the report by Dr. Webb. They reported to us that they'd need more time. We said, of course. We put our concerns into writing, mailed them a letter, and gave them a period to get back to us on April 15th is what we requested. We received a response that they would be unable to reply until May 2nd, although President Lewinsky indicated that perhaps maybe she gave you guys her response to us. I just checked in with the office. We have not received such a response. Hopefully it'll be coming our way. But we were delighted to see that the MPRB can timely respond when the right pressure is applied. By this, we're referring to the April 15th letter dated to you all to address these concerns that were brought forth at the April 13th hearing. We were very surprised to learn that they could address all of those same concerns within 48 hours, but needed multiple weeks to respond to us. It's unsettling because it seems that the MPRB can only respond when the correct pressure is brought forth. The MPRB is uninterested in communicating and engaging with the community. They're only interested in engaging with City Council when funding is at issue. Now is the time to address these concerns. Deny this funding until the MPRB can be held accountable for its actions. Thank you.
Thank you. If you'd like to let us know who you are. Thank you, ma'am.
Yes, Maria Pittner. Good morning, council members. I work with Liz Pitts Cartwright and the Community Justice Project, led by Nikki Levy-Pounds. As city council members, you hold the authority to demand true equity. I come to you today because we are concerned about the actions of the Minneapolis Park Board and their lack of responsiveness to us, to their constituents, and they seem to only be responsive to the hand that feeds them. As you are aware, there was a 2012 environment and organizational analysis that the Park Board had done for them. That story told of a hostile and toxic work environment for individuals of color. Another report was done just last year, and it shows that there has not been much progress made. They seem to be able to rattle off all the things that they've done in their April 15th letter to you, but as they sat across the table from us on March 25th, couldn't tell us one thing. That is concerning. Over half the employees in the assessment done last year said that policies and programs did not promote diversity at the Park Board. And also noted in that report was race as an issue rarely came up at the leadership level unless it was asked about. Equity starts in our own backyards. Please deny this funding until those answers and that progress can truly be made. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. I think we had a John Herman, and then Pastor Virginia Jones, and then Jake Verdon. Yes, sir.
Madam Chair, members of the council, my name is John Herman. I've lived in Minneapolis for almost 45 years. And in that time, I've had a lot of occasions to work with the Park Board. I was the chair of the Chain of Lakes Water Quality Task Force, where the Park Board took the leadership role in creating one of the first major wetland complexes to clean up the city lakes. I did much of the work on creation of the Cedar Lake Bike Trail at the Capitol, where we were able to get a special appropriation to acquire that property, and for the first time raised millions of dollars of private money. And I've worked on many other park matters at the state level and served on the Legislative Citizens Commission on Minnesota Resources. I'm currently the chair of the Trust for Public Lands Government Relations Committee, and I think many of you know that TPL not only gave the Park Board and the city the #1 Park System Award, but also has been a quiet partner in looking at the issue of how broad, deep, and meaningful is the city populace and voter support for doing something about getting the parks up to the level that they ought to be. So let me say, as kind of a cleanup like Mark Andrew, I'm thrilled to see the park board and the council work out this sophisticated response. I think it's better than an initiative. I think it's a sensible way to approach a problem and to recognize that it's just one of many city capital priorities. I think Councilmember Goodman, Councilmember Johnson actually deserve extraordinary praise for initiating the fiscal analysis that led to this creative solution. And I'm also pretty excited to see the city has just brought Mark Ruff on as the city financial officer and the good work that he did in doing it. So I hope that the council later this week and the committee of the whole, in terms of sending it on, supports this with the amendments that Councilmember Johnson is going to offer. Let me offer just one little vignette,
And
if
sir,
I can.
if you can wrap up, please.
Over the last 3 years, I've spent many hours in Seattle, where my daughter and my grandchildren are while she's finishing medical school. And I have seen what it did to Seattle to spend millions of dollars on neighborhood parks. It has transformed the perception of neighborhoods in Seattle and the use of these parks by families that have thronged to them. And while I am sympathetic to the conversation about equity, I don't know a thing about the substance of it. I want to tell you that there is no place where equity and diversity thrives more than in the parks that I've used with my grandchildren in Seattle. They are filled with
Sir,
a
if you could please
kaleidoscope
wrap up.
of people.
Thank you so much.
I think doing this is a huge investment in that kind of diverse interaction. Thank you.
Thank you. We have Pastor Virginia Jones and Jake Burden. Yes, ma'am.
My supporting statement is why I think the funds should be put on hold is I be at Farview Park every Saturday. I assist another ministry over there, and I feed every Saturday children of less fortune and children of cutters. And it comes out of my pocket, my funds, between $100 to $200 weekly. And the park board, I noticed in my observation is that they don't put anything into the community for our children. They don't have a program to implement much for the children of less fortune or children of colors. So until they can do something for those children and our children and children of less fortune, children of less colors, I think that they should go back to the table, back to the board, and figure out what can be done for them, because their basketball is their passion. And for as outside basketball, I noticed that they have the soccer field, they have more push toward other race more so than children of colors. And I think the park board over there, Farview, and I can talk about Farview because that's where I'm stationed at, just don't have anything for them and the staff. And I heard someone bring up the staff. And I must say that the staff, I noticed, sometimes do have to work way overtime. Sometimes they have to stay late. And I just think that they're not fair to their employees and to their staffing. And I just think that the funds should be on hold until they look at the whole broadened picture of all of the race and of all of peoples of color, all of the children, all of the staff, and look at the whole broadened picture, before the money is released, and see all areas, and be fair. Just be fair. And just don't put the money into the community where it's already, things is going on that's don't need it at. Okay?
Thank
Let's
you,
be
ma'am.
fair. Come into our communities first and go back and redo the blueprint. Okay?
Thank you, ma'am. We had one more, thank you. One more speaker who had signed up. I don't know if others would like to speak. Mr. Burden?
Hi, good morning. My name is Jake Burden. I'm here with the campaign called Parks and Power. And I just want to say you can't say that you support racial equity and then ignore the powerful testimony that was given right in front of you. And I think any urgency that would cause a vote to happen today is a false urgency. The other thing I want to speak to is the strength when it comes to racial equity in this plan is the metrics that have been developed by Park Board staff for weighting the parks that will get investment. And that is not policy yet. That comes up for vote from the Park Board soon. There was just a presentation given to the staff. So what people are resting their racial equity hats on is not even cemented into policy yet. And I understand that there's racial equity language in these agreements, which there needs to be, but really the meat is those metrics developed at the Park Board. So give people a chance to organize. Come out, please, to the next Park Board meeting when the Park Board's going to face that vote and ensure that they actually follow through and do it. And let's figure out how we can connect. The other option, right, was a referendum. The worst thing that happens is the good stuff that's here gets saved and then it goes out to the voters. The parks, I just think it would be a false urgency to ignore the powerful testimony that was given today. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to testify as part of this public hearing? Anyone who did not get an opportunity? All right, then I am going to go ahead and close the public hearing. I'm actually going to ask if we could recess this meeting for maybe just 5 minutes, just to allow both the public and ourselves to take a quick restroom break. And then we would be back here able to do the business of considering what's before us. So I'm going to, I can just do that, right? I'm going to then, we will take a 5-minute recess to allow people to refresh themselves and come back to consider the ordinance in front of us. Okay, thank you. All right, welcome back. We are reconvening after a short recess to allow those attending the meeting as well as the city staff and council members here just to take a short break after, since we have been here for over 2 hours now. And what we have before us, and I want to say thank you to everyone who took their time to be here and speak as part of the public hearing, and again, acknowledging this was a public hearing that went over 2 council cycles. So there were speakers 2 weeks ago as well as speakers today who let us know their thoughts. And I want to thank you for spending your time to come here to our meeting. So what we have before us is a proposed substitute ordinance. And I wonder if, just to ensure we're able to get clear in our discussion, if the author of that wants to just move it so it's in front of us, because I understand you also have some amendments And then I know that kind of our thought was that Council President Johnson could be able to move that and introduce some of her thoughts on amendments that she just wanted to give us a heads up on, and then we might invite Superintendent Miller as well as President Walensky to come and let us know some of their thoughts, both on the testimony today as well as on the ordinance in front of us. All right? So if you want to go ahead and move that just so we have discussion in front of us.
So I'll move the substitute ordinance to be in front of us, and then I have some amendments to make to the substitute.
Okay, that's been moved. And we don't need a second because we're just in committee. So if you want to.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to run through my amendments to the substitute. And they are, some are substantive, but some of them are really language. And so you should have in front of you amendments to the substitute ordinance by myself. And the first amendment is reinserting the 20-year language. It's in red, so that the sentence reads, the City of Minneapolis and its Park and Recreation Board have developed a 20-year financial plan. And then that language is repeated in the last sentence. The City of Minneapolis has concurrently developed a 20-year financial plan to close a street infrastructure funding gap.
And as you just take a pause, I want to say the clerk just notified me if anyone here would like a copy of what the Council President is reading from, there are copies up by the clerk to make sure you're able to follow along with whatever is being discussed up here. Thank you.
Sorry,
Council
I
President.
have to say that. Thank you. And then on the second page, in the third paragraph, it says neighborhood park system means those parks that are owned, operated, and maintained, or owned and maintained by the MPRB. And that is language that has been developed by the Park Board to include the parks that are that there are operations from independent agencies in there. Then in item 16.1230, again, the word 20-year street infrastructure plan is added. And the last sentence on that page, which is the agreement about the capital projects coming to the Board of Estimate, there is a sentence that says, if bond proceeds are to be used, and this is in the street infrastructure part, if bond proceeds are to be used through the BET, Board of Estimate and Taxation, for street infrastructure plan funding, it is expected that the city and Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board's members of the Board of Estimate and Taxation will support the bonding proposals. Bonding proposals require actually a supermajority at this point of the Board of Estimate and Taxation. Then again, in 16.1240, 20-year neighborhood park plan. And then at the end of that page, under E, under operating funds, this is the 1% increase in the levy that will be proposed as part of the budget in 17, and then again in the red, and it is expected that the city and Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board members on the Board of Estimate and Taxation will vote affirmatively for this increase. On the next page, under project funds, it is the guaranteed minimum annual amount. Again, language that says if bond proceeds are to be used through the Board of Estimate and Taxation, it is expected that the city and the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board members of the Board of Estimate and Taxation will support the bonding proposals. These are for the neighborhood park capital. Then under item 2, under project funds, the city and the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board will review and adjust the guaranteed minimum annual amount on or before December 15th, 2020, and December 15th, 2025, and December 15th, 2030, based on new language, mutually acceptable objective measures of inflationary costs. Again, in the next sentence, examples of mutually acceptable objective measures include a number of things, including the consumer price index, wage growth, and a number of other things. And then on the very last sentence on the back page, The levy request authority is the title on item C here, and there's red language. It says the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board will retain its authority as provided in the city charter and state law to request a maximum property tax amount and rate from the Board of Estimate and Taxation, and to adopt an annual property tax levy within the maximum set by the Board of Estimate, irrespective of the neighborhood park plan. However, and then red language insertion, it is anticipated that the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board inflationary increases should not exceed the city levy inflationary increases. So with those changes, I'll move those amendments. And I would just speak to them, Madam Chair, if I could for a second.
Sure. Why don't you go ahead?
Okay.
And then I just want to say, I know Councilmember Cano has an amendment at some point she wants to make too, so I just want to make sure she knows that I will make sure she has her opportunity to do that. But we may want to hear from Park Board folks and then start taking discussion from council members that are more about questions or whatever else you would like to say. Okay? Council President.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. And I really want to say, in listening to people speak today, it just reminded me of, in my lifetime in Minneapolis, how different times in your life you use the park system in different ways. The lady that spoke about, her family, of the trophy of her children, I remember those days sitting in the gym at Creekview and watching girls basketball. And I think starting in third grade, it was a fun time, as a parent to be able to observe and help. I never was a coach, but those kind of things are what make a community and make a neighborhood. And we played all over the city too. We were at Creekview, but we got all over the city in different gyms, saw different neighborhoods. And it was a really great experience for my children. They love the parks. I use the parks more now in a very passive way, walking the dog, that kind of thing. Enjoy the beauty of the green space that we have in our city. I remember I actually lived in Amarillo, Texas for about a year and a half. I always tell people it was the longest year and a half of my life. But we moved there, and it was a city of about 100,000 people in the panhandle of Texas. And in that city of 100,000 people, they didn't even have, they had one park, and it was a central park with right downtown, had a Carnegie Library, and so it was kind of like a town square. And they would have like tennis courts and pools and that kind of thing at the schools, but there wasn't a park system. And I remember coming home for a wedding and getting in the car and going someplace, and I ended up being in Theodore Wirth Park and just stopping the car and thinking, oh my goodness, I have missed this so much. Here I am in the middle of the city in this beautiful park. I can look and see downtown Minneapolis, and it's amazing. It's amazing. We are so proud of our park system in this community. And so I think it's been a challenge. We have worked really hard to come up with an agreement that's a reasonable agreement that protects our taxpayers, but that does support the importance of this system to the people that live in our community and use our facilities in all the different ways that people choose to. So I'm really pleased to be able to work on this and hope that we can move forward on it today. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to ask if Superintendent Miller or President Walensky would like to just give us some of their thoughts, or we can also, as we discuss, ask you questions, I guess. I want to say to my colleagues, if you have a question you would like to ask Superintendent Miller or President Walensky, I think that they would probably be open to that. I'm not seeing that right now.
Chair Glidden and President Johnson, I just want to say that we are supportive of the amendments. And I too want to say thank you, in particular to Council President Johnson and Councilmember Goodman. It was really your work reaching out to us in November and saying, can we work out a deal? And spending countless hours with us, working through the issues, negotiating back and forth, and really spending time with us to understand your issues, you understanding our issues, and really coming to an agreement that worked for both organizations. It is really, truly because of the work that you led that got us to this place today, and I really am very appreciative of that. And I'm also very appreciative of the support of the rest of the council for this, and the recognition that parks are so vital to everyone's well-being in the city, that they are critical, and in particularly neighborhood parks, which, as Commissioner Tabb said, this is really about equity. This is about addressing the issues in neighborhood parks that are in 30% of our neighborhood parks are in racially concentrated areas of poverty, and our ability to address those and ensure that across the city everyone has access to that green space that restores their soul is absolutely critical. And so I just want to say thank you, and I am optimistic that you will support this resolution and the amendments that Council President Johnson has moved forward. So thank you.
President Walensky.
Thank you, Chair Clinton and council members. Happy to be back up here again. We had some very dramatic testimony earlier, and I just wanted to let you know that I had sent out a letter with Superintendent Miller earlier today that you should all have received, talking about how we are planning on responding to the, I can never remember the name, I apologize, that's why I brought this up here and then it immediately turned off.
Community Justice Project?
Yes, there it is, the Community Justice Project. We have a response that will be going out on May 2nd. It is not yet completed. We will be happy to make that available to you as well as the public. It will post it on our website. Most of the allegations that have come forward refer back to a report that was done in 2011, which came out probably 2 weeks after Superintendent Miller arrived here. Since that time, she has led us through a multi-year process in order to make our inner workings better and to bring us forward. The racial equity training that we're doing now as a board is just one piece of that. I'm sure when the document does come out, it will be multiple pages and a lot of spreadsheets, because we have spent an inordinate amount of time on this to bring some of this stuff to a close. We do know that this is a long-term process, and we are dedicated to completing it and going forward. I don't think there's ever a point when you're talking about racial issues where there's an end point. I'd like to think that there will be, but I don't think it'll be in my lifetime. But all of us working together to do this is what's going to bring it forward. Again, we are working on this. Superintendent Miller has been a leader in this, and we appreciate all her work and all the work that she's done with our staff to bring us forward on this. As to the other issues, those are personnel issues. We have been advised by our attorneys that is not something that we can speak about publicly. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a long list of council members who've asked to speak, or I don't know if they have amendments or other different things, so we are just going to go ahead and start going through that list. Was there someone? Okay. Councilmember Quincy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will be brief. I was just speaking to the amendment that Council President Johnson has brought forward. Obviously, I'm very supportive of these changes. I just wanted to highlight there are two of them of some significance that were included in the resolution, the substitute resolution that I offered on Monday. I just wanted to make sure that everybody understood that the intent was to include those in the substitute motion, and they included the definition of the neighborhood park system. This is something that the superintendent and I worked on before that meeting, and we just, it's one of those issues that happens when you do a quick turnaround of resolution to ordinance. And we just wanted to make sure that those two things got highlighted. One is the neighborhood park system ordinance, the inclusion of the mutually acceptable language in item number 2 under project funds. And I think some of the other items there about BET support, bonding proposals, et cetera, are all appropriate for that action. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody understood that this is something that was already intended, and it just gave us a few extra hours to clarify them and put them in the ordinance language. So thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Council President, for bringing them forward.
Okay. Councilmember Cano, did you want to, you want us to come back to you, or would you like to go ahead right now? Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I have a quick question on procedure. I have an amendment that I want to make to the ordinance, but it was based on the ordinance that was published on the website and on what was in this book. And so I want to know if I need to have my staff come up with new handouts to reflect the changes that now are being put forward before us by the council president.
Councilmember Cano, I'll just say, we are in a committee right now, so you do not have to have a written amendment for us. I think the question is just, is it clear enough so we understand what you're moving, and if you can identify where that is, and then if people have questions, if they're confused, then maybe we can just deal with that. So why don't you try to walk us through what you would like to do? And we are looking at this substitute ordinance. And then just a question for the clerk. We just go into then our third piece, and then we would vote on Councilmember Cano's amendment to the amended substitute ordinance. And then after you move your amendment, and then we'll go back to other questions or other amendments that council members might have.
I'm going to need to work on a specific clarification with the city attorney on the handouts of the amendment that I already circulated. The intent of the amendments are to once again codify the racial equity framework that we have all agreed to and have discussed publicly and privately in the work that we're doing here. So the handout that I gave highlights the first paragraph of the ordinance, and I guess, should I just read it?
Why don't you go ahead and and you have the section that you're amending is still the same, which is 16.1200, which is the purpose statement.
Yep.
Is that correct? Okay.
Yes. So the purpose, so this is 16.1200 purpose. The City of Minneapolis and its Park and Recreation Board are concurrently adopting the 20-year have developed a financial plan. So, okay, sorry, this is, I'm not sure who typed this out.
So I think I can see where you would like to add your language, if you would like me to just assist you a little bit.
Yep.
In line 2 of that purpose statement, there is a line that reads 20-year financial plan to achieve a shared goal of closing a neighborhood parks funding gap. And I understand you would like this to say closing a neighborhood parks funding and this is the new language, and racial equity gap. Is that?
Yes, that is correct.
And then there's a second time that phrase comes.
Yep, so on that portion of it, it's 3 words, and racial equity. And then when we move down the paragraph, we start with the City of Minneapolis has concurrently developed a financial plan to close a street infrastructure funding utilizing racial and economic criteria equity in a way that manages the impact of the 2 initiatives on city taxpayers.
So this is where I think you have different language. So I just want to make sure I'm understanding what you'd like to do. So after that phrase, which is in the next to the last line in the purpose statement, where it says close a street infrastructure funding, and this is where I think you want to add your new language, and if you could repeat it again, what is the new language you'd like to add?
So the language would be utilizing a racial and economic equity criteria. So we might have to remove the word close, because then we also remove the word gap.
So I'll just say that there is no word close in this newer version.
Okay, and are you referring to the council president's version?
Yes. So this would be the one we're actually amending. You're amending this amended substitute because she has put it before us procedurally. So that's why I want to make sure that we understand what's the language, and I think you've let us know.
Okay, well, the copy I have of the council president's changes does still have close a street infrastructure funding gap.
Oh, I am sorry. Yes, it does. And what are you saying? So repeat how you would like to change that.
The City of Minneapolis has concurrently developed a financial plan
a 20-year, this is the new language, says a 20-year financial plan.
Has concurrently developed a 20-year financial plan.
Yep.
To.
Madam Vice President,
Uh-huh.
if I might be able to jump in and help.
Sure.
I think the amendment might read, in that last sentence of section 16.1200, the city of Minneapolis has concurrently developed a 20-year financial plan to close a street infrastructure funding gap utilizing a racial and economic equity criteria in a way that manages the impact of the two initiatives on city taxpayers.
I agree with that. And the reason why the original language I had proposed about adding the racial equity gap language in here is because the city attorney's office brought to my attention that we as a city have not identified a racial inequity in the ways that we fund our streets and do our street infrastructure. So flagging that as part of the work, we will need to move forward. She just came over a couple of minutes ago to help me figure out how to codify this in a way that still acknowledges our commitment to a racial equity framework while still aligning with the current context of the city's work in this area of street infrastructure. So I agree with the language that the city clerk has put forward.
Okay. So Councilmember Cano has moved those language changes in the purpose statement. We have a priority motion, which is from Council President Johnson. Is this a clarity issue?
Yeah, I want the clerk to read this language again. So the last sentence, if you would, Mr. Carl.
The last sentence, or would it be helpful for me to read the entire paragraph?
Just the last sentence.
Okay.
Just the last sentence. The last sentence of this section would then read, the city of Minneapolis has concurrently developed a 20-year financial plan to close a street infrastructure funding gap, new language, utilizing a racial and economic equity criteria in a way that manages the impact of the two initiatives on city taxpayers.
Okay. So that was a clarification. We have Councilmember.
I want to write it down. So can you?
Okay.
I've got utilizing a racial and
Madam Vice
economic
President,
equity criteria.
Would it be helpful if I emailed it to everyone right now?
Why don't you do that,
Okay,
please?
thanks.
And then we have a couple of, we had Councilmember Reich had a question or a comment, and then I know the Park Board wanted to comment. Councilmember Reich, yes, sorry about that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, as we're hashing through this, I just want to make sure the intent as it's emerging seems to me to be that we are not recognizing an identified gap in terms of what we've done and what we intend to do. That certainly there's no evidence of that. However, if we're just reinforcing a policy that we have, which is to have an equity framework in all matters and all activities of the city, that we certainly can reinforce it here and memorialize it here if that's the intent. So, and it seems that's what we're striving for, and it seems what to be emerging before us. So I'll look forward to the final verbiage.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Reich. Is it Mr. Rice who would like to comment? Okay.
Thank you, Council Member Glidden. Brian Rice, attorney for the Minneapolis Park Board. Council Member Cano did share with the superintendent and I this language earlier about adding the words and racial equity gap. What I'd like to point out, I think the city attorney has done it for your infrastructure issue. In the record of all of this, the Park Board has identified an infrastructure gap and presented testimony to this body several times on that and to the board. And I believe the Public Works Department has also identified an infrastructure gap. There has been no testimony that I'm aware of that talks about the gap in terms of the racial equity in terms of infrastructure. In fact, the study that the Park Board did found that we actually have spent more in the last decade in parks and racially concentrated areas than we have in other parts of the city. So if anything, the record would show that in terms of the dollars that we have, there hasn't been a disparate amount of investment in those areas. There has been overall an infrastructure gap. So I think that we would, if Councilmember Cano's amendment is going to move forward, the first part of her amendment where she inserts the words and racial equity before the word gap should be changed and should conform with what's being considered for the Public Works Department.
So maybe that's a question for Councilmember Cano. is whether repeating that same language, which is a little bit of how we've done it throughout the ordinance, just to, again, reinforce that this is how this entire proposed program is expected to be designed, implemented, and so forth. So I guess what the question from the Park Board is whether instead of saying neighborhood parks funding and racial equity